In this lecture, I will be discussing the methods and sources of job analysis information. We will describe and identify different methods and sources used for job analysis, as well as their strengths and weaknesses. We'll talk about inaccuracies of job information. We'll create a testable hypothesis about job analysis. And we will look at the ONET information from RTI International, who has collected the data for the information recorded in the ONET. So what is the goal? Our goal in doing a job analysis is to achieve an accurate picture of what a job entails, including the duties, responsibilities, specifications or requirements, the context, etc. If you're going to accept a job, you want to know what you're getting into, right? So there are some things we want to have in a job analysis. We want it to be a description of observable things, so it describes what we can see. We want it independent of personal characteristics of job incumbents, so not specific to those people who might happen to be in the job. A coach can be boisterous and yell a lot at his athletes, or a coach can be quiet and reserved. Both can be effective. So the job analysis should not specify that a coach must have a loud voice. We want our job analysis to be verifiable and replicable. Someone else could do the job analysis and get the same results. We want it to be comprehensive and precise. It collects information on all aspects of the job. We want it to be repeated periodically so that it keeps up with changes in the workplace. So where are we going to find this information? We have several sources we can use for information on jobs. Each have their strengths and weaknesses. Job incumbents, the people who currently work in the job, are a great source of information, as they know a job very well. Sometimes it surprises me when someone thinks of all the people to ask about an issue, except the one that knows the best. Job incumbents have a picture of the full job and the requirements to do the job. However, a job incumbent does have some weaknesses. They tend to be more subjective. They may not know how to think about the job in a systematic way. And they may or may not have a good picture of the value of the job to the organization. Something that a supervisor or someone higher in the organization might have a better perspective on. Supervisors may have seen people come in with various qualifications to do the same job, and so be able to separate the person from the job a little easier. However, a supervisor, especially those who are more hands-off on more complex work, may not know everything that their employees do. For example, a supervisor may know that an employee promotes the product, but not know that this consists of making phone calls, creating online ads, and talking up the product at meetings. A trained job analyst has seen complete information on many jobs and has been trained on how to look at the skills and requirements of the job. Also, this may be someone who is not part of the company and therefore able to be more objective rather than tying values, and sometimes increasing importance, to certain job functions. We can also look at archival records. These can be useful as an objective measure of what is produced. With modern technology, some archival records, say electronic monitoring, can be an extremely rich source of information. Now we know what sources we might be able to use, but what information do we want? How do we ask for the job information? A job analysis will gather information on all aspects of a job, including the tasks, how often tasks are done, importance of each task, critical incidents, work environment, and the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics needed in order to do the job. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I want to describe critical incidents a little more. Employees are asked to think of a specific incident involving an example of extremely effective or ineffective performance. Extremes are used because they are more easily remembered and described. Items then are sorted based on critical dimensions of job performance. The advantages of critical incidents is that it's good for determining critical factors, things that would lead to successful performance, or things that may be disastrous in that particular job. However, it's not good for getting a picture of what is typically involved in the job. Generally, it will not be a standalone technique, but used in addition to other methods. So what methods of job analysis do we have? There are various ways of asking for the information. Observations, such as watching a video or watching a person do their job in person, allows a job analyst to watch and record the behaviors. It's important to cover all tasks at all times, so we can't just sample one part of the day or one part of the week. A downside is that the presence of an observer may change the behavior of the employee. It can be disruptive. Observation is best for physical aspects of jobs, as it's difficult to see the mental processes that people are engaging in, such as watching an author work. Participation. A job analyst may do the job to get a sense of the job and the nuances involved with it. We may use existing data. This may include a former job analysis on the same job in the same company, or a job analysis from a related job, or from a different organization. It also may include existing information from manuals or training materials. In this case, the ONA information is a useful resource. Interviews. A range of people are needed to do interviews, as everyone has different perspective of the job. Incumbents know most, but are least reliable and accurate. We want to use many incumbents when there are large variations in the job. In one study, 57% of participants said they did something they never could have done. These kinds of questions are used to weed out incumbents who are not reliable. Supervisors are less knowledgeable about the particular job, but tend to be more accurate. Interviews can be given using structured or unstructured questions. Structured questions are a set of standardized questions asked of everyone who is interviewed, and often will have a prescribed way to score them. Surveys can involve open-ended or closed-ended questions. Self-report questionnaires can be standardized questionnaires developed specifically for job analysis, such as a technique called the Position Analysis Questionnaire, or PAQ. Or it can be a survey developed for a specific job analysis. Surveys use pre-existing knowledge or taxonomies of job information to analyze a job. Standardized questionnaires are good for comparing across jobs because it uses a standardized form. Surveys tend to be cheap, and employees themselves describe what they do. It collects a lot of data in a little time, and we're able to do statistical analyses on this data. However, there is a tendency for incumbents to exaggerate their responsibilities. Surveys also allow people to be anonymous, which will decrease some of the biases we will talk about in a few minutes. A downside is that those filling out a survey must be literate in the language of that survey. Job diaries are when job incumbents record what they do throughout the day, essentially keeping a diary of their job activities. Often when a job analysis is conducted, it uses multiple methods and often goes from existing information to observation, interviewing, and then using a questionnaire. So how much information do we need for a job analysis? For legal reasons, it's good to use as much as possible. However, there does tend to be a point of diminishing returns. So we don't want too much information, or else it's a waste of our time and effort. So this is an example form used by an interviewer to collect information from supervisors. Think of the last time you saw one of your subordinates do something that was very helpful to your group in meeting their production schedule. When thinking of the incident, then the interviewer asks specific questions, such as what were the general circumstances leading up to this incident? And tell me exactly what this person did that was so helpful. Another form or method that can be used is to match up the task with the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to do that task. This can be done using a few steps. First, a task analysis. Generating a task list done by observing, examining job descriptions, and talking to subject matter experts. Reviewing the task list done by knowledgeable people, focus groups, and interviews. And then administering the task list to workers to rate the tasks with an opportunity to delete, add, and modify tasks. Then tasks are rated on relative time spent, difficulty in learning, importance, criticality, difficulty, and frequency. The number of tasks that are usually generated are around 100, but can sometimes be as many as 400 or 500 tasks. So we generate the task list, it's reviewed, and then it's administered to workers. And then there's a worker analysis with the KSAOs. We do this in the same way, and then we link these together. This links the tasks performed to the human attributes needed to do those tasks. It shows how important each KSAO is for each task. So example, we would have this chart here that lists the task and then has columns for each KSAO. Let's look also at the ONET data collection. In collecting data for the ONET, two sources were used for questionnaires. Workers and subject matter experts. Take a moment to look at some of these surveys and see how the O-Net data was collected. This gives you some insight into typical surveys used for job analysis. So in looking at the types of questions that are used for job analysis, there can be different ways of asking questions. Cross-job relative questions would look across different jobs and compare the job of a coach to the job of a teacher to the job of something else. Within job relative questions, ask within a job. Within a job, how important is a certain task? Is it more important than other tasks that you do? There are also qualitative questions that can be asked, leaving open-ended answers so that job incumbents or subject matter experts can provide information that we might not know. For example, the critical incidence technique needs to be open-ended to allow people to respond with events or activities that we don't know about. We can also look at different types of job analysis in terms of their purpose. Some job analyses are going to be more task-oriented, looking at what work activities are done. The procedure is designed to identify important or frequently performed tasks. It may ask about why. It may ask both about the importance and frequency of those tasks performed. A description of the work activities performed is developed and expressed in job terms, usually indicating what is accomplished. There's a focus on one job duties, responsibilities, and functions. Worker-oriented job analysis is a procedure designed to identify important or frequently utilized human attributes. For example, sensing, decision-making, performing physical actions, communication. There's a focus on knowledge, skills, and abilities. We also have some newer ways of collecting data, such as electronic performance monitoring. This is taking things such as recorded calls to a customer service center and can be coded for good or poor performance. For some jobs, it can tell us the frequency of activities done in a day, such as tracking UPS drivers. There are some concerns with privacy issues, however. Cognitive task analysis decomposes task performance into mental processes and knowledge content. There's a focus on unobservable factors, which are more important now that technology means jobs are more cognitive and less behavioral. This can use the Think Aloud protocol, where experts talk through what they are thinking as they complete a task. And this is particularly focused on cognitive processes. We also gather information about the work context. This describes the context within which tasks are performed, such as conditions or characteristics of the work that can put demands on a worker, the interpersonal relationships that are engaged in the work, the physical work conditions, such as the work setting, extreme conditions, hazards, and work attire. and structural job characteristics, such as consequences of an error. We can use this information to develop a realistic job preview, which is basically telling a worker exactly what they're getting into when they take on a job. We've found that this tends to lower turnover for those who come into a job. They are more likely to stay. So since we recently talked about research methods in developing hypotheses, let's create a testable hypothesis about job analysis. Let's imagine that you have been conducting job analyses for your company, and you've needed to assess the amount of time employees spend on each of their tasks. You may have noticed when asking employees in an interview setting that they have a really hard time remembering how much time they spend on various activities. And they appear to be estimating this just based on their memory, which is a little foggy. Maybe even thinking more about job activities that they've done most recently, and assessing them as spending more time doing them. So you decide having employees do a job diary where they record their job activities each 10 minutes throughout the day. You know this is a very labor-intensive activity and will not be taken well by the employees, and maybe not by management either. So you need to show it's better than just asking in an interview or on a questionnaire. So we need to do some research. So you develop a hypothesis. Your hypothesis may state, job diaries will provide more accurate information on how much time is spent on work activities than a self-report questionnaire asking employees how much time they spend doing each activity. Assuming that the job activities are similar from week to week, we could have the same group of people answer a self-report questionnaire in week 1, and then in week 2 do job diaries for the second week, and then compare the job diary activities to the self-report questionnaire from the week before. Mental processes of information as well as social pressures can affect the information provided for job analysis. Morgeson and Campion in 1997 laid out a framework for how to think about these inaccuracies and divided them into 2 categories: cognitive sources of inaccuracy and social sources of inaccuracy. Cognitive sources will be familiar to anyone who has taken cognitive psychology, and includes things like memory errors and contrast effects. Social sources should be familiar to those of you who have taken a social psychology class, and include things like self-presentation and conformity. Since not all of you have taken these classes, I'll go into a few of these in a little more depth. I'm not going to talk about all the possibilities within these categories, but we'll discuss just a few of them to give you a good idea of the kinds of influences that can occur. Cognitive sources of inaccuracies come from our limitations and tendencies in processing information. A job incumbent may not remember everything he or she does, especially for work activities that occur infrequently. I like to say people are cognitively lazy. This is not to say that all people are always unwilling to put in thought, but it is simply a statement that in our mental system, we try to be as efficient as possible. This results in some tendency that can either serve us well, as in the ability to make quick judgments when we need to, or it can have negative consequences because we tend to categorize and we don't always take the time to do complex or systematic processing of all situations. Because we just can't systematically process all information coming into our brains, we tend to use shortcuts for processing and recalling information. Heuristics are these mental shortcuts. When it comes to recalling job information, we may use shortcuts such as what we call the availability heuristic, in which things that are more easily recalled are assumed to occur more frequently. So just because we think of something, it must occur more frequently. Unfortunately, work activities that are unusual may stand out and be easily recalled because they are different, but they are not necessarily any more frequent in our actual activities. The representative heuristic, another commonly noted heuristic, that if two things are seen as similar, they are the same. For example, a job analyst who sees a lot of jobs may develop expectations because a job currently being analyzed is much like another job he or she has seen in the past, and starts making conclusions that it will be similar. We also have to be concerned with the order in which we ask about work information. Contrast effects result from comparisons. If asked about importance, one thing may seem important, but not as important as something else asked later. Asking it first may result in a higher importance rating. So imagine being asked about the importance of safety in a job, say in a restaurant, that deals with cleaning supplies and cooking equipment. Sure, there are safety concerns, making sure that the cleaning supplies don't get in someone's eyes, or they don't get mixed up with food items, and that people don't get burned or hurt by the heating elements. However, if a job analyst just came from evaluating a job in the airline industry, in which overlooking a safety concern for an airplane mechanic could result in the crash of a plane and death of many people, the restaurant job may seem to have less important safety concerns. Primacy and recency effects in recalling information are important to recognize as well. The primacy effect is the tendency for people to remember the first or beginning information they encounter. The primacy effect is the tendency for people to remember the first or beginning information they encounter better than the average information. Whereas a recency effect is the tendency to remember the most recent information relatively well. In cognitive tests, generally a list of words or numbers is given to memorize. People tend to remember the beginning of the list, the primacy effect, and the end of the list, the recency effect, better than items in the middle. This can be seen in recalling job information as well. When asking employees for a list of job activities, a job incumbent may think first about the most recent things they did, the recency effect. The primacy effect could be things that they did when they first started the job, or things they did first thing in the morning on that day. The people around us, or even those imagined to be around us, have an influence on what we do and say. Social sources of inaccuracy in job information stem from our reactions to being in a social situation. Two of the possible processes include conformity and impression management. Imagine a group of job incumbents are in a focus group to talk about their job. The majority of people in the group say that safety concerns are an important part of the job. A person who has not found this to be true may just go along with the group, either thinking they didn't understand their job as well as they thought they did, maybe they should be more concerned with safety and they just haven't been, or maybe because they are tired, it's the end of the day, and they know that disagreeing with the rest of the group will drag out this meeting and extend the conversation. So they simply go along and conform to what the majority of the group is saying. Other inaccuracies in information may come from job incumbents trying to put themselves in the best light. When asked how much time people spend on supervision, they may want to say more than actually occurs, because they know it's important to the company and that it looks good. They may be trying to impress coworkers, bosses, or even the job analyst. Whatever the case, they try to make themselves appear better than reality. This is one reason it is important to stress the purpose of the job analysis to those who are participating in the data collection. To stress that it's really about the job and not the individual may help people step away from the tendency to engage in impression management. So what can we do as we're doing job analyses? First of all, be aware. Know what possible inaccuracies can occur. We can train job analysts on the tools and questionnaires they will use. We can create forms with behavioral examples to minimize subjectivity. The forms that do not have behavioral examples encourage cognitive and social influences. So if we can get away from that, it will be helpful. And we should use multiple sources and methods to find converging evidence for the results that we get.